Hey, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Hook, Line, and Striker.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And we are here this week with Brian Koshenina.
Captain Brian Koshenina.
Captain Brian. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Josh and Emily, for having me.
Yeah.
So for people who this might be their first time, meeting you, so to speak, we do have comments. So if people are interested, drop questions in the comments as we talk. But for people who are at home, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, my name's Brian Koshenina. I'm obviously, after you said it, captain. I run Muskies and More Guide Service. I'm an owner-operator. I live in Burnsville, Minnesota, which is just south of the Twin Cities. I grew up fishing all over the Midwest. I was lucky and I had parents that believed in the outdoors, believe in camping, fishing, not so much hunting, but, that my family did enough of it, so I was exposed to that. But I grew up on the east side of St. Paul, and it's not the mecca of fishing in Minnesota. But, like I said, I was lucky enough to have parents that were fishermen and outdoorsmen. And I have a whole family. I mean, I had an uncle that was a charter boat captain. I've got a cousin that's a Bass Pro. I've got another cousin that's a guide. I got another uncle that was a Bass Pro before Bass Pro was even popular. So I think I come from a long line of fisher people. So.
Well, and certainly a background like that adds to, being, the excitement of being a fisher, getting out there and, finding all those great local lakes.
Oh, definitely. And, we were just talking about this off air that, a lot of people don't kind of pass up the Twin City area in regards to fishing. And it's really too bad because we have so many trophy lakes around here. I mean, crappie, pike, bass, muskie, you want to go for a sheephead, go for a sheephead. You probably catch a trophy, but you don't really have to go that far. And I started Muskies and More Guide Service about 17 years ago with that thought in mind. Instead of wasting a lot of gas and maybe get skunked up north, come with me and I'll teach you a few things and we'll catch some fish and have a good time. And you don't have to go through 2 tanks of gas to get there. So.
Well, and the other thing that we were kind of chatting about, you were alluding to this, people think up north and they think that must be better. It's like up north must be written in golden letters up somewhere. And people just, the excitement stirs. But, especially just outside the cities like that, people are so often, skipping over some of those really great opportunities. And so, to be able to be local or stay local or learn how to fish local is a huge benefit.
Oh, it's definitely a huge benefit. I mean, and, as fishermen, as fisher people, like I like to call it, because I don't want to leave the women out, obviously, because there's a lot of women anglers. So, but no, as, fisher people in general, I mean, one of our main jobs, one of our main things that we should do is promote the sport. And a lot of families can't afford to go to these big lodges and afford to a week away from work and they can't afford to hire a guide. And I try to keep my rates down and expose them to some of the lakes around here so that hopefully they can get some gear and enjoy a day on the lake by themselves. I don't know if you guys realize this, but what I've noticed lately is the amount of people that are fishing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen so many ice houses on my local lake. I've never, ever seen, and every night it's packed, and the fishing has been good, but it hasn't been that good, so I'm thinking that COVID's really brought people out and back to the outdoors, I mean, let's be honest, you can only play video games so long before they get boring, right?
I agree.
I mean, that's just, that's the way it is. But I mean, you put a rod and reel in a kid's hand and mom and dad gets to share an experience with the kids. And, that's what it's all about, So.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that because, I'm hearing from almost everybody in Minnesota how busy the lakes
Yeah.
are.
How many fish?
Yeah.
And so I kind of have to chuckle a little bit. And, for all of you that live in Minnesota, I'm sorry, I'm really not laughing at you, but it really is the excitement of so many new people around. And Josh and I will frequently talk about, how important it is to stop and talk to those people and help introduce them to the sport. And I heard that's something that you're fairly passionate about as well.
Very passionate about that. In fact, I'm kind of revealing this now, but I am starting an ice fishing school next year. It's in the works. It's basically ice fishing 101. It's beginning ice fishing because there's so many people that are intimidated because they think it costs so much to get on the ice. And honestly, it's probably one of the cheapest sports you can get into.
Yeah.
And even if they have the gear, they don't know where to go. They don't know what to use. They don't, there's one thing that drives me nuts. And I don't know about you guys, but when they put 10-pound line on a panfish combo and sell it, because you can point those people out on the ice and you're like, hey, bud, try this once, try my rod and reel and see the difference. Have you been catching any? Well, no. Well, try this. But it's little things like that people don't know about. And I figure, you know what? I'm already taking people out on the ice. Why not have like classroom instruction, and then the other half is out on the ice. And actually, people get the chance to buy what they need because we'll go over that in class. And they'll be able to go out and use it. And we'll have I'll have some instructors. I have some people that I know are really good anglers that I really trust. And so I'm really excited about that. It'll be Muskies and More School of Ice Fishing, and more than likely it'll be probably December. I'm thinking about starting in December. When it gets close to when we have ice. Walkable, safe ice. So. Yeah, well, really keep that.
You keep us apprised of that schedule because we might be showing up.
But with that, you're talking about the Muskies and More School. So it is Muskies, or it is, are you doing panfish? Are you doing a little bit of all of it?
Well, being a multi-species guide, and actually the Muskies actually end in December, so that's the Muskies and More. That's the More part of the business. So I didn't want to, how like some businesses, you name your business and you're all of a sudden you're just locked onto that. A lot of people go Muskies and More. Oh, you're a muskie guide. And I said, well, and more, So, and that's the part of it. Multi-species, we'll probably start out just with panfish. And if, work our way to walleye and how to set up tip ups, how to use a rattle reel. One thing that's really interesting to me, and that a lot of people don't know, how to spool their own line on their rod. I found that when you take it to a place to have it done, a lot of times they wind it so tight and they put so much line on there that the second you open that bail up, you got coils all around.
Yeah.
And it's simple stuff like that. And we as fishermen that have been on the ice for a long time kind of take that stuff for granted. We don't realize how much we really know until you meet somebody who doesn't know. and then you're just like, you really don't know that? And I'm like, you kind of got to go back a little bit and realize that, you were at that point once, somebody helped me out, and now I'm going to try to offer that to somebody else. So
that's awesome.
Well, and one more thing that I love the idea for you especially is because, you're the kind of person that can, be out all the time and kind of stay on fish. And so when you are holding a school, the nice thing is, you can go out and you can practice jigging all day. But if you're not jigging at fish, if you're not catching anything in that process, then you're not actually learning anything. And so to go out with a friend who may or may not be successful, but a huge thing about a school like that is to be able to build up some confidence, and that's something that that's what's so important.
Confidence is huge. Confidence is huge in anything you do in life, but in fishing, confidence I would say it's probably about 70%. You got to be confident in what you're using, what you're doing, where you're fishing, why you're fishing there. And once everything works and your confidence builds to maybe 90%, 100%, and you feel comfortable, then like I said, maybe you'll pass that on to somebody that's maybe at 50%. So yeah, you that's exactly right.
Well, and then you know that the next time you go out, it'll be bad weather, and then it puts you in check.
Yeah. Even people who are out all the time, I mean, it's not like a TV show where they film it over 1 week. I mean, like literally, you finally find the crappies one day, and you go back the next day, and they're not in that area, and you shake your head and you scratch your head, and you're like, crap. Now I got to drill 300 more holes, that kind of thing. But yeah, it does. It happens. It happens to everybody,
So, part of what brings on some of that confidence is, the items that we bring out with us. So yeah. Josh, you put on a comment before, a question actually from Jeremy. So what is your go-to rod and reel for walleye and panfish? So if you had something, what do you suggest?
Well, if you are a beginner, I would suggest just going to the store, getting anything from a 28 to a 32 inch rod for either or, panfish or walleye. For walleye, I like a medium light. I do like a fast tip just because when they're light biting, you want that, you want to be able to see that and feel it. I don't recommend a stiffer tip for walleye. For panfish, I mean, noodle rods, HT products, the Ice Blues rod. I mean, you can't go wrong for $10. You just can't, that's a good one. But if you're more advanced, I would go into maybe the custom rods, like a tuned up custom rod or a JT, or even like a side custom rods. I mean, he does unbelievable work, sensitivity, basically builds anything you want, any color you want. But when you're talking fish that can be finicky, like walleye, you want a faster tip. At least that's what I feel comfortable with. I like the longer rod. I like it when the fish load up on, start to load up in the middle, and you get that backbone of the rod to the handle. I like that, especially if you're sitting almost directly over the the hole. Yeah, that's what I would definitely use. Now for reels, HT has an AccuCast. It's 6 bearing, made specifically for ice fishing. That's a good price. I think it's $29. Or like a Shimano. Shimano makes really nice reels that work well, 500s and 1000s sizes. But I don't know. Do you guys use the drop reels at all?
Yeah. I'm actually a big fan of the inline reels. I personally don't think that the trigger drop is necessarily something that is essential to almost anybody. I think you have a lot more control, and you get to know where the fish are in the water column by counting. And so I know that my arm is about 2 feet, so I can rip out enough line for it to go down to where I want it to.
Sure.
Dropping it, it's not consistent enough unless you have heavy enough gear. And a lot of times, especially later in the winter now, you're using a lot smaller stuff, and so that drop rate can be really inconsistent, especially when it's cold, because the oil's not helping the bearing spin. So yeah, I like the inlines for panfish a lot.
I'm going to be the opposite, though. I mean, that's what's funny is Josh and we fish together all the time, but that doesn't mean we do it the same way. And I really find that I like just a traditional open face reel. But the thing that I will note about that, though, is the way that we've been fishing this year, because it wasn't necessarily typical. We found ourselves fishing some of the back bayous of the river. The Wolf River is near us. And so early season, I mean, we were fishing 3 and 4 feet of water only all the way through the beginning of January. And so there's, you know, at that point, the type of reel that you use becomes so much less significant. You know, the drag is really important, especially being around all the branches and everything. But then otherwise, we found ourselves, you know, it got cold and we're looking for those deep holes, and we might even be fishing deep, you know, getting down there. They're not even necessarily suspended all the time. And so, you know, to have a tungsten and to be able to just open up that reel and have that line fly down there, I've been super successful with that this year.
And that's a good point. I mean, when you're in deeper water, it is, unless you're in your static, you're in a house. If you're hopping around a lot, the open face is definitely going to be more efficient for the deeper fishing later in the season. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and I've also found too, when if you're hole hopping and it's really cold and you're getting ice and build up on the line, I kind of find out that you know when you're using an inline reel, that ice really builds up in there and it doesn't quite work as well as you'd like it to. And that's when I switched to a spinning reel. Just because, you know, you open it up, it drops out, you're good. You're not getting line overlapped and, you know, yeah, so I kind of noticed that too, hole hopping, but I've gotten into the inline reels in the last couple of years, and I got to be honest with you, for pan fishing, I love it too. I really do. It's easy. You know, like you said, you know, your arm's 2 feet and they're 4 feet down. Well, you know, count that down and you know they're there. So, yeah.
So, you know, this sounds like a little bit going backwards in the conversation, but I guess it's not really. You know, especially with this cold snap, how is the ice out there by you?
We have about 16, 17 inches, and it's been really spotty up until about, probably maybe 3 weeks ago. You know, a lot of the lakes around here hadn't closed up until, I think it was January, early January or mid-January, actually. What am I saying? Yeah. But, you know, so you had to be really careful, for quite a while. You know, we were hearing reports of, you know, trucks going in, ATVs going in. And when, like at this time of year last year, I mean, we were driving out, you know, it was no problems. But as of now, it's pretty safe. You know, we've had trucks driving on, and we've had, you know, dual axle, you know, houses on the lake, and it's not too bad around here. So.
Good.
Yeah, that is pretty good. You know, we're finding that we had kind of some crazy weather here in Wisconsin, and then that super cold set in, but that there's a lot of cracks that are still really taking place. So whether that be the formation of the ice or, you know, just some thin spots, a spring, an inlet, an outlet, whatever water is doing at that time. So even though it is, February at this point, I mean, we are still really diligently checking ice here and making, because, you know, like we're saying, you could have 15 inches in one spot and then 6 in another, and it just happens so fast.
Well, and that just goes with safety. I mean, so when I first started with Striker, right? I wasn't actually directly with Striker. I have a buddy that owns the bait den, and we were selling suits at the ice shows. Okay. And it was probably 2012, 13, somewhere in there. The float suit had just came out. And for me, safety is number one. And it doesn't matter if, like you said, if there's 15 inches over here, it doesn't mean that there's not 4 inches over here. You know, there's a lot of lakes with a lot of springs, you know, and having the right safety equipment, like a float suit, is crucial. Because, I mean, let's be honest, you never know. I mean, and the more prepared you are, even when you don't think that you're prepared enough, you know, I mean, all the better, you know. Either that or you're telling the wife, hey, take out a bigger insurance policy because, you know, I'm going to do this regardless. So, you know.
So hearing that, what is your float suit of choice?
Well, it was the hard water suit, but then I got a hold of the Climate, and I got to be honest, I love the Climate, but I also love the Predator. So therein lies the problem, because I wear both. So honestly, I don't have a bad one. And that was one of the reasons why I really loved Striker in the first place, because they were the first company. Because I'm a big guy. I mean, I'm 6'4", I'm 350 pounds. I'm hard to buy clothes for. And, you know, here's a suit that came out that actually goes up to 5X and 5XL tall that I can fit into and be comfortable and be warm and most importantly, be safe, you know, and that's, I mean, that in itself, you know, and when I started selling them, I mean, just because I felt passionate that I finally had a company that identified with me, that it became really easy to share that passion with everybody else and bring everybody to the Striker family, you know. I you know, I'm kind of going off the deep end here, but I just yeah, I really like my float suit. I love the Predator. I use it in the fall for muskies. I use it in the spring for early crappie. I use it all through the winter on warmer days. You know, but when it like this cold snap we have, I mean, I've been in the climate for the last week. So
Yeah.
and it's funny because I'll be out there, everybody's in the same exact spot, nobody's moving, and I'm out there drilling 100 holes. You know, and people are driving by me like I'm nuts. But I'm warm. You know, I mean, I'm warm. I'm not feeling the elements like everybody else is, you know. And I love going light. I love, you know, if there's, I got a what do you call it, a Strike Master light flight sled, or like one of those older. I don't even know if they make them anymore. I got it from a buddy of mine, but I ended up modifying it so I could fit my Garmin on there and fit everything that I needed on there. And I use that I used that 2 days ago, you know.
Yeah.
I mean everything's right there. I'm out hole hopping. It's 7 below and everybody else is in their house, you know, and I'm catching fish. And I don't know if they are. I hope they are, but you know, it's just that's the one thing I love about Striker. I've never been disappointed in a Striker product, and that's even before I was with Striker. So, yeah.
Well, and you know, it's we're kind of laughing at hearing you talk about loving all the suits, but I mean, I feel the same way, to be honest. I use the Climate. Josh uses the Climate. I think he might also love a Predator one day. But, you know, hearing you talk about all the suits is kind of like talking about the reels. And, you know, it's about using the right tool for the right situation. Are you a wheelhouse guy? Are you a hole hopper? Are you an extreme conditions kind of person? And like you're saying, you know, whatever that is, there is a fit for you.
Exactly.
So at the risk of moving on too quick, there's a great question here, not about bibs, but about gloves. So do you wear gloves or not? And then for hole hopping, what's your choice? They love the second skins, but still end up with no gloves most of the time.
See, this is the part that that I have trouble with, because I'm not a gloves person. I was a goalie in high school, all the way up through high school. I played outside, played hockey outside. I was always outside, so I never really got cold. But now I'm 47 years old, and I'm starting to get cold. And my glove of choice is actually the Climate Crossover mitt.
Speaking my language.
I love that glove. I mean, you got a mitt, you've got a glove, and you can take the fingers back, and you actually can feel everything. And I love that fact, because if it is a cold day, I mean, you got a 3-in-1. You know, how many gloves out there are 3-in-1s that you can actually feel? He mentioned second skin. That's my other one of my other favorite ones is the second skin gloves, just because they're very tight to your skin, but they're double layered, so you're not getting cold with them. You know, on really cold days, I would probably go with something thicker, like the Climate Crossover. But for me, you know, it takes a lot for me to wear gloves. I like to feel everything. I got to feel the bite. I mean, you know, I've got a bite indicator on my rod, but it's just not the same. You know, you got to feel it too. And a rod is an extension of your arm, and you got to be able to not only see that tip go, but you got to feel it too. So I'm not a big on gloves, but if I were to buy a set, it would definitely be the Climate Crossovers.
Yeah.
And I would tend to agree with you. I've been running the crossover. Well, we both have been for a lot of years now. And we actually started with those stealth gloves. And for how warm it was this season, like it was hard to wear those crossover mitts because they were a little warm for that.
Yeah.
But I really do like those stealth gloves. And I'm like you. I've been outside in the winter my whole life, and I'd never really wore gloves. And this is the first season where I've actually worn gloves consistently. Yeah. And I've even fished in them. Like I've taken fish off the hook with the gloves on, forgetting that I had those stealth gloves on. And so those have been really nice, actually. And the fact that they're waterproof. They're waterproof both ways. And so the other thing that people don't realize is when you're dunking your hand in and out of the water, I'm a water quality specialist. So I'm working in the water all the time. My hands get cracked.
But
wearing those stealth gloves, they're waterproof from water going in, but also from water coming out. So it's been keeping my hands not so cracked.
Sure.
Because I'm grabbing fish out of the hole with them. I'm taking fish off. And it really helps me fish because my hands aren't bleeding and hurting all the time, from being cracked. And people that fish without gloves all the time know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I'm constantly using the wife's hand cream because
that's what I was going to say. Is I opt for lotion and I just hope for the best because honestly, I have some really great electronic hand warmers. So I'm not like using the disposable packs all the time. That gets to be a lot. They're rechargeable. They're great. They fit my pocket. But, when my hands get to that point where they're so super cold where you have to do something about it, honestly, dunk them into some heat like that. But the other thing that I'll point out about the climate crossover mitts that we started with it has 2 layers in that glove, and you can actually put a hand warmer in to the glove.
Into the mitten portion.
Between the layers. So, if it is really that super cold, then I do flip them open, and at least I have the feeling in my fingers, and I will fish with those. But anytime there's a fish on the line, that's the first thing I do is rip them off.
Those electric hand warmers, here's another tip. If you're not using them for your hand, stick them in a bag where you keep your extra batteries if you're using a drill. They keep your batteries warm, and they'll keep them longer for you. They'll keep the power longer.
There you go.
That's awesome.
That is a good tip.
So we were before we get too far away from gear here. We were talking a little bit earlier off air about another program that you've started. You want to tell us a little bit about that? Because that was really cool. I really like that one.
Well, basically, I'd volunteered for several nonprofits, the last one being Simply Outdoor Experiences. And what we did with them is we actually got people into the outdoors by, giving them the tools they needed to at least get them started. But the one thing that I noticed is that a lot of people that are around don't give to nonprofits, right? But me as a fisherman, one day I was in my man cave, I guess you could say, my tackle room, and I noticed, God, I got a lot of stuff here, that I'm never ever going to use, So what I did is I just gathered some stuff up, threw it in a box, and then when I got to the launch or whatever, I would just hand it to somebody that was at the dock fishing, or I'd see some kids and I'd hand out an extra rod or an extra reel that I wasn't going to use, and they were just generally grateful. They couldn't believe that somebody would do that. Well, then that kind of morphed into where I started giving like everything you need to get out fishing, other than like a boat, to people.
Sign me up for that.
So I started getting like sponsors. HT was one. Striker had given some stuff out. And I was just thinking one day, I'm like, you know what? I don't want this to be a nonprofit, but I'd really like people to get on board. And, the whole premise is if you have extra, there's always somebody out there that needs it, that doesn't have it. So if you can give, hey, even if it's used, clean it up, bring it to a dock or to, wherever you are, and just hand it to somebody that might not have that. And my wife thought it'd be a good idea to call it something. So I called it Operation Get 'em Fishing. And so far, I think I've probably given out probably $5,000 worth of stuff. And that's been in 2 years. And the funny thing is, though, is that the whole premise is that you, the angler, not me, but you, take your unused, unwanted stuff, clean it up, and hand it to somebody. Well, then it turned into, well, let's hand it to Brian. Brian can get it. So now I have a whole basement full of rods, reels, you name it, it's here. But because of COVID, I kind of slowed down this year, giving stuff out. I didn't donate to a girl up in Ramsey, Minnesota, that would just love to fish. And she was actually saving up. She had 3 things she wanted. She wanted a car, she wanted to save up for college, and she wanted to save up for fishing stuff so she could fish with her dad and her brothers. Well, I mean, how can I not give to that? You know what I mean? I mean, here's a girl and she was cutting firewood and selling firewood to do it.
Oh,
geez. That's awesome.
And so I actually contacted the father and the mother, the parents, and they couldn't believe it. They were just in awe, And I only told them I was going to give them like a little box of stuff, I'll just drop it off. It's nothing big. Well, ended up bringing my buddy with, and I mean, there was like 7 boxes full of stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, but you know what? It's not the fact that you're giving. It's the fact that they don't expect you to give.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not about what I do. It's about how they feel, after it's done. And even the dad, he was like, well, how can I repay you? And I'm like, no, you don't repay me. Pass it on. If there's something that she's not using, give it to, maybe she can get her friend into it. Maybe her, maybe she can give it to her little brother. I don't know, but definitely don't pay me back. So I've been blessed in the industry. I have a lot of good sponsors. I've met a lot of great people. And I want to give back in some way. And I think I found my way, and I hope everybody kind of follows that way too and gives what they can give. Because I mean, let's be honest, these days, I mean, everybody can deserves a smile or something. Because times aren't that easy lately. So,
Well, and I think that it's really perfect timing to be talking about this because, we kind of started earlier talking about how the lakes are packed this year. And, that is just evidence. You walk into a big box retailer and, those fishing shelves are wiped out. You go to some of the online retailers, you go right for those products and they are sold out even online, maybe for the rest of the season. That sounds so crazy, but those people who are wanting to get out there, wanting to try it, they want your old equipment. If it's not your most prized possession, or even if it is, share something with somebody else that's gonna love doing it too. Plus, you never know, you might gain a friend out of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you might be helping out the next fishing superstar. You don't know.
Right.
You're helping somebody to find their passion. I mean, you never know. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, you go up to Fleet Farm or Gander. I mean, the shelves are just bare, and I mean, I bet you any avid angler, you go in their tackle box and they've got extra line, they've got extra tackle, they've got extra sinkers, they've got, just sitting there. They're never going to use it. So yeah, if you can pass that on and maybe make somebody else happy, that's what it's all about. So
well, and there's a comment that popped up from Nick. He says that he always carries extra packs of his favorite tube jigs. When people ask what I was catching them on, I hand them a pack. So, we're here talking about rods and reels and tackle boxes, and it does not take a big gesture. This could even be, even if you're not giving up an entire pack of baits, I'm telling you what, there's times where Josh and I have given people even just like a plastic or two, like, here's what we used. And the look of appreciation on that person's face face, because I think they also learn something from that moment. Wow, this is totally different from the bait I was putting on my hook. There's so much there that you can open up people to.
Well, and not to mention the amount of structure and spots that we've gained from this last summer. We rolled up on a couple of old guys rolled up on us, and they see us catching fish. We handed them plastics, and they're like, "Oh yeah, did you guys know about this tree that nobody knows about over here?"
Super brush pile.
And we gave them like 2 plastics, and they were pleased as little peaches.
Yeah, I bet you're like, and what else? And
yeah.
what else? Yeah, no, and you're exactly right too. And my pet peeve is when somebody asks a question on social media and they're so afraid to ask because it's a simple question, and all they get is gripes and griefs, and they don't want to ask that question again. Why? I tell people where I fish. I tell them exactly what I'm using so that they can be successful. I mean, generally I get paid for it, but most of the time I'm giving out advice all the time because that's what you should do. Don't laugh at somebody because they have a question. I mean, the only stupid question is the one you didn't ask, so, that's sorry to go off, but that's one of my gripes. I can't stand that. And you see it on the ice all the time. You see a lot of great people and but you always have that one. And I really wish we didn't have that. And like Nick said, hey, if he's catching them on tube jigs or, tube plastics, he gives out a bag. I do the same exact thing. I mean, Snyder's Lures, people are so in tune to what is being advertised that sometimes we get tunnel vision and we don't realize what else is out there. Mm-hmm. And I've always been a jig fisherman. In the summer, in the winter, and tungsten came out. I stopped using lead, used tungsten, and I was catching fish. But probably about 7, 8, 9 years ago, I really started using spoons to catch crappie. And what I noticed when I use spoons, and in particular, I use a spoon called the Moon Fry. It's from Snyder's Lures. Okay. And what I noticed is that I was catching the biggest fish in the school. I wasn't catching the most fish, but I was catching the biggest fish. And people always ask me, why do you always catch the bigger crappies? I said, because I'm doing something different. I'm offering them something different. If 10 people offer the same thing and they're not going to go for it, I might be that 11th person that gets that big fish, And I tell my clients that too. I said, I have a friend that uses the weirdest stuff, and I always laugh at him. But the funny thing is he's always the first one to catch the biggest fish. He almost always catches the most fish. And I'm like, I would have never in a million years thought about using what you're using today. I would have never thought of that. But I'm learning from him. I've learned over the years that, spoons catch big fish. I know, like tournament fishermen, they need to get it down to those fish, the weight factor and time factor and, all that stuff. But I gotta be honest with you. My go-to is a spoon. And it catches everything. I mean, pike, bass, you name it. If it attracts it, they'll bite it. So.
Well, and that's kind of inspiring, because I think a lot of times people get stuck in a rut, and I'm definitely one of those. I mean, it's so easy to put, for example, like a gold tungsten on your line and then just like never take it off all season, But, I think that there's so much more out there, and, to not get caught up in that, especially if you feel like the bite is slow or whatever, try something new, try something unique, try a spoon.
Yeah, exactly. Get out of your comfort zone. One of the big things that I found too is that, every lake's different, but it's very similar in where the fish are going to be located. Mm-hmm. Around me, my lakes around here have a lot of structure. And right now, I use a camera to identify green, healthy weeds, because where there's green, healthy weeds, there's oxygen, which equals fish. And that's a huge huge advantage to using a camera because you can identify those areas. Not only that, but what I do is I identify what fish, what species I'm looking at, because when you're in a flasher, I mean, if you've used a flasher long enough, you know where the bluegill are, you know where the crappie are. But some days, like you said, Josh, they might be stuck to the bottom, and you don't know what's down there. You're seeing flashes, but you don't know what it is. And that camera eliminates so much time. I mean, so much time, and you learn a ton off of a camera. And I mean, I was fishing one day, and I'm watching my camera, and I'm like, why is that fish biting, but these three aren't? Well, one thing I noticed is that their dorsal fin was slightly back, just a little bit. When their dorsal fin came back up, they were active. I would have never noticed that unless I was watching it in a camera. And and the active ones, the second their dorsal fin would flare up just a little bit, they became active. So that's one thing I learned from a camera, from using a camera. So.
Well, and I have to say, there's a day or two where I've had a camera down there, and the only reason, I mean, I'm telling you, I use some really sensitive equipment, and the only reason that I saw that bite is because I had the fish on the screen because it was so light, and then you set that hook, and lo and behold, that fish is there. But, like you're saying, looking for weeds, checking out that ecosystem. Oh, fish stop biting. Well, there's a pike coming through. There's a whole lot of things that you can learn from watching a camera.
Well, and not only that, you get to find out that species that you wouldn't think of being in spots are actually swimming around. Like we were lucky enough to be fishing out in a deep basin this summer, and we dropped our camera down. It's 30 feet of water in the middle of the lake, and we dropped it down, and 10 feet away is a muskie, and it came straight up to the camera, and we're like, well, no wonder we can't keep up with the school of crappies, because this thing is like herding them around the basin. Exactly. But I would have never guessed, like out in the middle, suspended, 10 feet down, is this like 45-inch muskie chasing these panfish around.
Exactly. And their instinct is when they don't have cover, it's to school up tight. I mean, that's a fish's instinct. That's like when we talk about like different structure in a lake. Are you fishing a basin? Are you fishing a lake with a lot of structure, with flats? Those are key to where you're going to locate those fish. If they don't have any structure to relate to, especially crappies, because crappies love to hide. If you send your camera down there and you're shallow, you're in less than 15 feet, and you're on a weed line, and you're looking at all these crappies, and they're stuck really tight to those weeds. Well, that's why their instinct is to go into cover. And like you said too, I mean, just the other day, I was on a really good crappie bite. And I send my camera down there, and I'm not seeing anything. I mean, no life. Well, I'm panning around. Well, there's a pike. Oh, there's two muskie. Oh, there's a pike. Well, there's a huge bass. Well, no wonder. So I had to drill, probably 100 holes, and I ended up finding them. And you were right. They were moving around, and these fish were just crawling that weed line, waiting for them to slip up, and that's what they do. So,
yeah. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So it does not feel like it, but we've talked for a while here. So I guess, a few last minute questions. Do you have anything to share that I did not ask about?
Not
I know that's a super vague question. Sometimes people have like a burning last topic that they're dying to get in.
Well, I'm going to actually show you my absolute favorite striker product.
All right,
perfect. You're going to be surprised.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I have had this is my extra set of boots that I bought 3 years ago. I've had my striker boot for 3 years, and I wear them all the time. I mean, literally all the time. If I'm not on the ice with them, I'm on the four-wheeler with them. I'm out in the back with them. I'm doing chores in them. And I have the first pair, and these have been sitting in the box because there's nothing absolutely wrong with them. I mean, it's crazy. I've had other brands, and they have not lasted that long. Not 3 years. And I'm not going to say the competitor, but it's a very similar boot to this, you know. The other thing that I love about these boots, is that you see the heel right here? When you put on your ice cleats, a lot of these boots don't have this here. And your ice cleats slide down all the time, and then you get the gap in between, and then you get ice and water and slush in there, and it feels like you're walking funny and you're slipping. And I don't have that problem with these boots because they stay above this and they don't slide down. Unless I'm trying to kick them off, with my other foot, like you do. But yeah, that's one thing. I mean, they're good to 40 below, 6mm neoprene. I mean, you can't go wrong. They're warm. I do recommend on really cold days, wear a pair of wool socks, if you're not moving, just keep your feet, warm. But yeah, I love the Striker boot. So.
Well, and one of the things that I'm totally able to tell about your boot is you don't fold them down, do you?
I do not.
Because actually, I will admit, I wear that boot, but mine does honestly have a crease in them. But because honestly, I love the feature that it will fold all the way down, not quite all the way to your ankle, But first of all, it makes it super easy to put on and take off. So there's a lot of people out there, especially boots might be tough to get on. Fishing, you have an aging crowd. It doesn't matter who you are. You'll be able to get these boots on and off. But that also adds to controlling the temperature. So when you are out hiking, if that tall boot is too much, you're able to fold it down. But again, also that comfort, maybe you want a tall boot, maybe you want that protection, maybe it's slushy practically up to your knees, or maybe it's actually feels like 1,000,000 degrees because the sun's out and it's the end of the season. So I love that feature that it's able to fold down, and I just think it's funny that you don't have a fold on there yet.
No, not yet. I will. I probably will. Not quite yet. I'm tempted to wear these, but I just love my other ones. So I'm gonna wait until something happens. I'm gonna wait. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that is certainly one of the famous questions that everyone hears on social media is what boots do you wear? And that makes it an easy answer.
Well, isn't it funny too, is you'll hear like 15 different boots, and some of the boots I've never even heard of. Right. But it always seems to come down to one style of boot, which is this style of boot, and one company that I hear a lot of. And what a lot of people don't know is that Striker offers a better boot that's cheaper, especially if you buy them at the shows. I'm in the Marine General booth. You guys are in which booth?
Up North Sports in St. Paul.
Usually, yeah.
Yep, Up North Sports. And you guys know, like, by selling these boots, how popular they are. It's funny too, is they stick them on the ground, right? And people literally kick the box, and they're like, "Oh, Striker makes boots? Yeah, yeah, we make boots. Yeah, and they're super comfortable. Try them on, And once they do, and they realize how cheap they are, and I've never had a customer in the last 3 years come back and say, "Hey, you sold me a bad pair of boots," or sold me a bad suit, or whatever, Right. And that's one other thing I want to mention too. Like Jen and Jeannie and the guys back at the shop. I mean, even Jim. I mean, you can talk to the president. He's there almost every day. And if you talk to them about an issue you might have or that you've had with the Striker product, I mean, you hear of great customer service. We truly have great customer service that you don't find, just anywhere. And that's another thing I love about the company is if you have an issue, you're going to get it solved, and no matter how minor it is, and you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're talking about all these great products, but you're exactly right that, it's a whole great company and really a whole great group of people that are really behind all of that. So, it's easy to look at them like a big company and that they're all over. But, really it comes down to our local people here that really run all of that. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So, we have a lot of people that were, asking comments and questions and everything along the way. So there's a few things that we even typed in. If anyone has other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll certainly try to type them in. But for everybody else, can you remind us, how could we get a hold of you for things like guiding, or if we have extra equipment, or maybe we're interested in next year's ice school?
Sure. You can go to muskiesandmore.com. That's my website. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram. You can call me at 651-210-0128. Or you can email me at Brian@Muskies, Muskies, and and more, MORE.com.
Awesome.
Perfect. Otherwise, be watching Striker. Definitely we'll put this chat up there. And, I'm betting that there's going to be more fishing reports by the end of the season. So thank you again to everybody at home for joining us on this episode of Hook, Line, and Striker. Cannot wait to see you next week.
Talk to you later, guys.
Happy fishing.